Hello everyone, and hello Daniel today. How are you?
I'm very good, thank you. Not too bad. Busy day, but that's certainly how I like it, so can't complain.
Thank you for joining today, and Eid Mubarak to everyone, and happy Easter for you as well. Like the last time we talked, you were in Easter, so how was like your Easter?
Yeah, it was good. So we actually, even though I'm now only 30, we
Yeah,
still do Easter egg hunts in our house with my brothers and take it quite competitively. Yeah, so that was really good. Went back to the UK. So I live in Berlin at the moment, but
yeah.
every kind of Easter and Christmas and stuff, go back to see the family. Yeah, so that was really really nice. Thanks, and Eid Mubarak to you as well, of course.
Thank you for that, and thank you for joining today again. And for the Easter, like since you mentioned like you are just going back to it and having like Easter hands, so I would like to know your story and how did you get into coding, or let's say to area.
Sure. Yeah. So I think the first time I coded, actually, funnily enough, was with MATLAB at during my engineering degree. So in 2011, I started doing mechanical engineering at Imperial College. At the time, I thought that kind of planes and engines and everything were quite cool. I was motivated from some posters that were at my high school at the time. Didn't really know too much about computer science or coding. And after just doing some super simple kind of linear algebra stuff during one of the software courses of the degree, I then kind of got hooked, spent all my summers doing Python projects and things like this. And thankfully then, basically after doing some of these projects, I was then able to move away from my engineering degree, which I liked. Don't get me wrong, I thought planes and engines and everything were cool, but not quite as cool as robotics and stuff. Yeah, so kind of just through a bit of self-learning. And I think that's one thing that I would say is quite good, particularly with software. It's something that you really can learn a lot of online, unlike many courses where actually you have this kind of insider knowledge and you really need to go to the degree to kind of get that insider knowledge and be part of the in crowd and stuff. I think with software, it's really one of the ones that's quite democratized already, relatively speaking, and therefore it's quite liberating that kind of someone without any formal training like myself can kind of go online and spend the time and pick up the skills. So yeah, that's kind of how I got involved. But then of course I learned a lot from my colleagues during my PhD in computer science as well. It's not all self-learning, of course. Being surrounded by great people you learn a lot from as well. And during my internship at Amazon I learned a lot. And so I've been kind of refining my skills as much as I can ever since. Yeah, and not looked back since really. So
That's really awesome. Like, it's the self-learning story is really great. Like, I would like to know what motivated you directly to go to robotics. Like, what got your attention there compared to
I,
mechanics and engines?
yeah, I think kind of, I don't know, like it's a bit of a cliched path, but I think I was always really interested in the brain.
Yeah.
When I was doing my engineering degree, I actually bought a cognitive neuroscience textbook, like the standard textbook. I've forgotten the authors now, but I bought a lot about that. I was also quite interested in psychology, and I just found the idea that you could write symbols that would replicate. I also bought a book about how the human eye works. I found all of this super interesting. And I found the idea that you could kind of code something that could replicate all of this to be just like such a black box unknown area. Unlike, I mean, to kind of not to sell engineering short, but in a way it feels like if you go and work how propulsion, jet propulsion works. We know how engines understanding intelligence just seems such an unknown. And I think the last 10 years has shown that it was, because all of the fundamental technology that's enabling this now was, not discovered when I started my engineering degree. So it's kind of a much more ripe place for fundamental breakthroughs, and that's always just exciting, and that's kind of what attracted me. Just we don't understand this at all, and it's really clear that we don't. Let's try and work out what's going on, kind of.
That's like the idea of going to psychology and then moving to coding is kind pretty interesting. Uh, so you what made you have like this kind of connection?
Yeah, well, it's also not that unique, to be honest. It's a bit of a cliche. I mean, Geoffrey Hinton also very much kind of, his interest predominantly lies in the brain. Demis as well, the head of DeepMind, also did a lot of neuroscience in his PhD, kind of studying mice and things. So
Yeah.
there's such a clear analogy. And I think, I'm certainly not the first person that kind of found the commonality of being interested in how the brain works, clearly knowing that we understand nothing of how consciousness works, and unpacking that leads you down kind of how can you recreate this artificially to some extent. So it was partly that. It wasn't the applications. I wasn't interested like so much in like, oh, this robot can be used to build a car. It was kind of like, how is it that I can perceive the world? How is it that I know how to pick this up? And just from like noisy data coming through the eye, and it was just like, it's kind of, and I think this is maybe the case with a lot of people that go into AI. It's kind of
Yeah.
just the pure curiosity, like, how does this work? It's so crazy that this works at all. Like,
Yeah.
let's just learn more about it and explore. And it's kind of that natural, just intrinsic excitement, I think, that always directed me towards, I mean, AI. That's why I started my kind of machine learning, deep learning PhD in 2016, but also computer science much earlier than that. Just, it was the same kind of reasoning, really. It was always the kind of AI side of computer science that drew me in. I don't know if this kind of resonates with you. Like, kind
Yeah.
of, what is it that excites you about AI, for example?
Yeah, for me, it's AI. It's more of like automating stuff rather than like
Right.
having it like much connection with the brain. But like we get
Okay.
like inspired by biomimicry, I think it's called, which is
Mhm.
like you get inspired by the biological stuff and you have and how you see that, then you can like implement it in PC.
Yeah.
For that, like I just remembered like in one episode we had the Professor James McLennan from Stanford. He was like a professor in psychology and he got curious about how to do this kind of mathematical equation in computers at his
Yeah.
age. It was like this old machines when you have like this kind of dots and you have like the
Yeah.
old
Yeah.
computers, and it was like an interesting story as well.
For sure.
For you, you told me like you started a PhD, you had like a machine, a master degree, then you started a PhD in neuroscience, I think,
No,
and
no, sorry, no, no. It was in like robotics and 3D
in
vision. It
robotics,
was,
yeah.
yeah.
And after that, you started the work you are doing right now. So, uh, how it feel for you, like from moving to PhD to starting a company?
Yeah, to be honest, it's kind of scratching another itch, I suppose. There's a little bit less of the pure creative, how does the brain work? Like what we're doing now is pure infrastructure, but that was born out of a frustration basically when doing the research. So um, I mean, 2015, at the time, I was using Cafe. So there's a C++ library that everybody's using back then. And that was really good, super efficient, but not so easy to kind of rapid prototype because C++ is compiled, obviously. So you need to wait, several seconds every time you make a small change. So that then when TensorFlow came out in 2016, or maybe late 2015, I'm not sure, but at least it was 2016 when I started using it. That was way better. It was all in Python, and that's just a bit simpler to get things up and running. But it still was basically a thin wrapper around what was effectively pure C++ graph construction. You couldn't, for example, look at the intermediate nodes very easily. You basically had this tf.session, which was just a fully C++ graph. And in order to like
Yeah,
look at the intermediates, you had to bring them out explicitly from the session, and wasn't very Pythonic. And of course, I mean, I'm paraphrasing something more complex, so people will disagree with various things I say, quite possibly. But like my paraphrasing of the narrative is then kind of from that PyTorch came out. This was Pythonic. It didn't operate based on statically constructed graphs. It was just asynchronously scheduling pre-compiled kernels to the GPU so that you could still evaluate all of kind of Python's dynamic stuff in this kind of interpreted way without compiling. But then you could kind of stack up these kernels. And in the end, actually, even though Python's very slow, because the bottleneck typically is these big kernels on the target device, because it's big matrix multiplications and so on, they actually end up being the bottleneck. And even though the Python logic is slow, it's still kind of waiting upon the results of this stuff. So it doesn't actually cause that much of a runtime slowdown. Anyway, so PyTorch was then a lot easier for rapid prototyping, which is why it suddenly took up a lot of a hold. So then we ended up having some people using Cafe, some using TensorFlow, some using PyTorch. I interned at Amazon where they were using MXNet, which similar to PyTorch, but didn't quite have the same foothold. Then there was things like JAX, which are really good because it's fully functional. You can do super efficient vectorization and parallelization, much more control over gradients with arbitrary nesting of gradients in a functional way, which has a load of benefits if you're using Hessians and Jacobians and stuff. Sorry, this is a really long answer. My
yeah,
point being, but what this resulted in, all these great frameworks that have their own niches and are really good for kind of different styles of research, it meant that we ended up having, everybody I knew in the space was using a different framework. We had people who were working at DeepMind that I knew that were using JAX, other people working at Meta using PyTorch, others working at Google Brain using TensorFlow, others in the lab using a whole mix of them. And this just made it very hard for us to collaborate together. So originally Ivy was built as a purely functional abstraction layer that enabled the creation of framework agnostic libraries, which is not too dissimilar from some other great works that I should mention, like EagerPy, Keras, obviously massively predating Ivy. Among others, TensorFlow also has an agnostic backend, which basically enabled us to build libraries that everyone in the lab could use and share. So mechanics, vision, robotics, these are libraries that still exist in Ivy today. But as time went on, basically, I felt as though that the fragmentation, that I observed was very much mirrored in the whole of ML. Nobody was taking this too seriously. There was things like Onyx, but they didn't really work. And I can explain why that doesn't always work, at least from my perspective. And I just found this quite frustrating and then decided to dive down this kind of grandiose rabbit hole with this vision to unify the field. Let's see how that turns out. So far, so good, at least in terms of our progress with Ivy. But and this is kind of where it came from. So a move away from the pure research creativity and just a passion to solve this burning infrastructure problem that I'd faced for many, many years. And I just thought, well, let's just try and get this right. And if we do, it's going to help a lot of people like me in this kind of situation. Sorry, that's a very long answer.
That's like the answer is really cool, to be honest. Even it's long, but like, when you talk about something long and you get deep, it's like you just like have the full picture of the situation there. The thing here, like you mentioned the vision, like it's cool. Like you started from a personal problem, and it was like it's more than it was like bigger than just personal program. It was like a whole community problem, and then you start to solve that. So and you mentioned like shortly the vision of AV, which is like to unify AI. But like we have some question from the audience from Omair. He asked like, can you share the AV's vision? Like, can you? What's in it like more than unifying AI?
Sure. Yeah. So one thing to clarify is actually that we're not only interested in unifying the frameworks. So just a few benefits. I think there's a few use cases that are quite clear. The first one is if you want to build tools that anybody can use going into the future, or even yourself can use into the future, Ivy gives you the means to future-proof your code. So if you write your code in Ivy and some new technology comes along in 3 years' time, you'll be able to still use that code you wrote, and it will support all the latest frameworks, infrastructure, hardware. So it's kind of just like, if you write your code in Ivy, you're basically writing in this kind of higher level mathematical realm that's not limited by any of the technology specifics, basically, because it's kind of our central mandate to continue supporting everything really, really well. And then you can share it with the community. You can, you write your model in Ivy, then share it with your friends and say, hey, here's this model I wrote and what they're using. If they're using TensorFlow, JAX, PyTorch, etc., all of them can use this and put it straight into their project and it will just work. So Ivy is also complementary as a framework. It's not like your whole project needs to be written in Ivy for you to benefit from Ivy code. Your project can look like anything, and Ivy code can come in and be one line, the whole model, the entire project, whatever kind of level of Ivy abstraction you want, you can do. So the ability to like build universally is the first one, and this is definitely a big vision for us to see Ivy is becoming this kind of standard. It's grandiose, and let's see how far we get with that. But I think this is going to help a lot of people to kind of not have to then be locked in, and preventing code becoming deprecated and things like this. And big graveyards that then appear, like there's no need for big old graveyards if you write your code in Ivy. The next one is kind of rapidly prototyping. So if you are doing research still, although PyTorch is obviously, particularly in research labs and things, getting a lot of popularity. Still, if you want to get state-of-the-art stuff, it's fragmented across frameworks. Like, if it comes from DeepMind, it's in JAX. If it comes from Brain, although now Brain is DeepMind as of yesterday, but maybe comes from TensorFlow. If it comes from a top university in China, it's maybe in Paddle or MindSpore, and China are very high on the list of top performing universities at top conferences and so on. So there's a lot of fragmentation in cutting edge research. And if you want to try things out quickly and frictionlessly, you need to reckon with this kind of, messy bleeding edge landscape. And what Ivy enables you to do is to take any version of any model written anytime, get it into your version of your framework, which includes maybe your pre-written optimizer, your trainer class, everything that already is part of your project, and you can just bring things in. And this is quite an enabler for speed of thought research. And the final one then is kind of deployment. And I think, sorry, this is a very long answer, but I think
it's okay.
The very last thing is just that then you can also, we're unifying the infrastructure and the hardware as well. So the idea is that If you take any model in any framework, we're on kind of working on having bindings for kind of our own MLIR dialect, kind of OpenXLA, TensorRT, OpenAI Triton, and just very flexible deployment backends as well that can sit under our API, enabling very flexible deployment. So you can kind of, depending on which cloud provider and model and a hardware vendor and so on are best for your particular needs, you kind of, again, you have the whole flexibility to choose from as well. So these are some of the things. And long term, obviously, we just want IB to be as useful as it can possibly be in the field, basically. Again, kind of a long answer. Maybe I
Yeah,
kind of
that's
should
super
focus on a more
awesome.
concise
Like,
one. But
that's super awesome. And just like I like the idea that you are just like not unifying the frameworks, but you are moving as well to the hardware and the deployment, which is like
yeah.
having a full, let's say, full solution for everything.
Yeah, no, that's the vision. Obviously, it's one thing at a time. So in terms of the hardware support, that will be coming later. We kind of at the beginning, certainly the main utility is the frameworks, but it's certainly on the roadmap in the near future. And I think that's something else just to kind of add to that. I think that while there is certainly a lot of fragmentation at the framework level, and will continue to be, but the same is certainly true at the compiler infrastructure level and the hardware level as well, for sure. I mean, I've already mentioned kind of MLIR, which is kind of built on LLVM, this multi-level intermediate representation that makes it easier to write compiler infrastructure to support any targets. There's Apache TVM, obviously, which kind of does something similar, but not quite with the same like principled approach as MLIR, I would say. There's, I mean, OpenXLA also a really great initiative. As I say, OpenAI Triton kind of taking away, enabling people to do CUDA arbitrary GPU programming in Python, where you can pretty much write your kernels and optimize them without going into C++. A kind of, I suppose, a bit of a competitor to CUDA that's open source. Loads of great stuff happening, and we kind of want to just do our part to try to make sure that all of these are as well integrated with all of the frameworks and all the hardware vendors as we can, using our kind of level of abstraction that's a bit higher up, and make sure we support all of those as well, so that we're always staying complementary and we can just plug in and do our part to make everything work. Basically, is the thinking.
Yeah, that's really awesome. That's like a really bold, let's say, vision for the machine learning frameworks and the work we are doing.
I guess you certainly can't criticize us on how kind of ambitious our visions are. That's
Yeah, I'm ambitious as well, by the way. Like, but like I didn't go like that far yet. But like, the ambitious people who are the one who are making change in the world. I remember like one of the ads in for Apple. It was like this for the crazy ones.
Yeah,
If you
I know what you
remember
mean. I
that
mean,
ad.
I guess time will tell. I certainly wouldn't put myself in the bracket of changing the world yet, but hopefully we do. Of course, that would be great. And so far the journey's gone really well. And so far, it seems like a lot of people are backing the initiative. A lot of people on the Discord and starring the repository and like the idea of what we're doing. So that suggests that we're on the right path. Yeah, I guess time will tell if we end up changing the world or not. But we're at least going to try to.
Yeah, you are having an impact as well, at least. So I think you already like get like supported by YC,
That's true.
and
Yeah,
that's
no, I'm very happy about that. Very honored about that. Yeah.
yeah, that's like really awesome. That's like making you are putting yourself on the top of the industry.
Well, let's see. It's certainly an honor to have been accepted. Again, I'm reluctant to take on too much praise until we have something that's kind of really doing the job. But yeah, it's been an amazing. I mean, I was actually just in this latest batch. It's kind of such a privilege to be among so many. I mean, considering again that I'm not formally trained in software engineering, and like there's people in the batch with who've just been working at Meta for the last several years, who've been leading teams at some of the best companies in the world, and to be among to be kind of among people like that is kind of something I never thought I would have been doing. I mean, even a couple of years ago, I certainly wouldn't have put myself anything like in that echelon. So yeah, it's been really fun.
That's awesome. And how it feels like for you to be like in this kind of community in YC, because like I know YC is like not just like a financial support thing, but like they have a whole community behind that.
Yeah, it's amazing, to be honest. Like, so there's obviously kind of Slack groups, and I don't know if you're familiar with kind of this book-based platform that founders get access to, but has access to really, really useful features basically and lots of tools. And I think just the kind of support that, like, I mean, as a sole founder, it's also very impactful to have this network where you can kind of just reach out and say, hey, this is some kind of weird, unexpected situation I'm having to deal with setting up the company. There's a lot of logistics involved, obviously, and operations considerations to make, and there's a lot of common shared experience that such a network has, which is invaluable when you're kind of, you know, out there a little bit isolated in terms of how do I deal with this, and, you know, let's just ask the current members in the batch. So it's definitely something that I mean, if anyone's kind of looking to start something up, then I would definitely recommend applying. It's definitely, you know, been well worth it for us at least.
That's awesome. Like, I think YC like is building you on or giving you like a support system for the work you are doing.
For sure. Yeah, for sure. And it feels that way, definitely. But I think also, what I've said all of this, I don't want to undermine, to be honest, the extent that just having a great team is also a support system. I think one thing that I just want to emphasize is that, I mean, it's great having fellow founders going through all of this, but we take as much as possible, at least, we take quite a democratic approach. Have discussion syncs every Tuesday and Thursday where we have kind of a strategic question for the company. Every single person at the moment in the company, including administrators, engineers, and so on, everybody joins a meeting. We go into breakout rooms where each room has a maximum of 3 people. Everybody kind of discusses the topic, and then we come back, and every room kind of nominates one person to kind of, you know, suggest, present to some extent the thinking from that room on the discussion, and we kind of all collectively come to some kind of consensus, or maybe we don't, maybe it's an open question that we're thinking about collectively as a team. But I think, I mean, I think having a team where everybody has ownership and everybody's kind of really part of the entire operations of the company and the decision making, and is very much on board and therefore feels on board and included. This fosters a really good environment, at least as far as my experience is. And this also builds a support network. I also don't feel like a sole founder making top-down decisions in a stressful environment. It's kind of us as a team all coming together and working out what's best for the company. And that's also a very powerful support network, you know, for myself as well, to be honest. So
That's
I
really
think that's
awesome.
worth emphasizing.
It's just like not just when you do something like that, it's not just like you're having a support network, but you are enabling the people in the company to feel like they are having an impact and they are having a decision, which is
Exactly, yeah, and that's a happy byproduct, and in a way that is even a byproduct. It's kind of the central purpose. The central thing is, if I made every decision, I'm one person with one set of experiences, I would quickly become the central point of failure. I think I have a decent intuition, but I don't have a perfect intuition, and I've not experienced every vantage point that the team has. So I'm of the opinion that, without doubt, our collective opinion is more powerful than you know, one person's opinion, and therefore it's really like for the company. It's not for people to feel involved. That's a happy byproduct, obviously, and they are involved. It's not a gimmick, but for sure, I think it seems to. I think people therefore feel genuinely kind of invest in Ivy because you know, they are having control over its trajectory meaningfully, and making the trajectory better. I have to say, like, every time we've opened up to the team, in every single case, my thinking on the question has changed in a way that's enabled me to then make better decisions. So that's also important, I think.
that's great. For that, like, we get a question from the audience again. It's asking about like how much you spend in your time in your work.
Sorry, hang on. How much time do I spend?
Yeah.
I spend a lot of time. Well, this is one thing I would say. So I'm pretty rigorous on doing 8 a.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Saturday. So I do 6 days a week, 12 hours a day. But then I keep quite rigid on never working on Sundays. And I think I need to be rigid there because, as many founders are, you know, there's a lot of workaholics among founders, and there's only so long you can kind of work, you know, 16 hours a day every single day. Eventually you'll start procrastinating because it's impossible to stay doing really focused good work for that long. I mean, Elon Musk might disagree, but I think you need some breaks to kind of just long term be in a healthy mindset to make decisions and things like this. So yeah, anyway, I do 12 hours a
Yeah.
day, Monday through Saturday, and then I always take Sundays off where I make sure to play five-a-side football and have a long, slow brunch and kind of unwind a little bit. Yeah.
That's awesome. Like you even have like your family time as well.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah,
so
like the one in the Acer.
exactly. So me and my partner, both of us, so me and my girlfriend go for brunch every Sunday at the same place. The people that own the cafe know us really well. I play football with the same group of friends for kind of 3 or 4 hours every Sunday, get a bit of exercise, a bit of sunshine. Also important for kind of
Yeah.
sustaining yourself long term. Yeah, so for sure. And I actually think that's important. I know, how would I say this, the kind of complete workaholic has been overly romanticized, I personally think. If you're needing to like work 16 hours a day every day just to keep the lights on, like you're not hiring people to take ownership for you enough. Like,
Yeah.
in my opinion. Yeah, this is kind of how I say it.
Yeah, is that like make it hard for? I think the thing you mentioned, like it's when you have like own ownership of everything and you don't give it to other people, you will fail at the time,
I think so.
and you will have like burnout as well.
Yeah, you'll have burnout and just long term, like I don't think it's your responsible to it's not your responsibility as a founder to kind of do everything and have your
Yeah.
finger in every pot. It's your responsibility to bring people on board as best you can who you trust and give them that trust, give them that ownership,
Yeah.
let them run with things, let them fail. Like in
Yeah.
most cases, right? You say, hey, you can make the decision, hey, you can go do this. And it would probably be like in short-term optimization, it would probably be faster if I did it in terms of like completing the task. But you've also got to be like long-term optimizing that people need to learn on the job. They need to get ownership. They need to make mistakes with some level of, stakes if they make those mistakes in order to learn from them. So you kind of just need to be okay with, you should be optimizing for giving people the trust and the responsibility, even if that means that the task they're doing doesn't get done as quickly as it would. Because long term, it's going to be getting done quicker because you're not having to do everything, obviously. So
Yeah.
I think just like doing that early is a good thing, as much as possible.
That's awesome. Like to get back to we have some kind of latency, by the way, in the comments and the
Yeah.
conversation itself. But like, we have Dennis asked you which position in the football you are playing.
Which was, sorry?
Position in the football.
Oh, I like to play striker, but inevitably, because I'm such a kind of, I end up always being defender because no one else does it, and I kind of can't stand our team just concede goals because everyone's in the box. So I prefer to play kind of a Steven Gerrard role. I'm a Liverpool fan, so I prefer to kind of be attacking midfielder. But more often than not, I end up sweeping up at the back and then kind of attacking as an attacking defender.
Okay. I think we just lost the connection right now.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I think I can hear you. Can you?
Yeah, I can.
It's much better. Yeah.
But I was saying that actually I used to play rugby way more properly than football, because at the height of it, when I was like 16, 17, I was playing maybe 5 or 6 games a week and kind of doing maybe 10 kind of sessions, including training sessions, while playing for like 5 different teams, kind of the school, the district, the county, my local club, and kind of really, really took that quite seriously. But when I got to 18, the bruises started getting a bit bigger as everyone kind of got a bit heavier and went through puberty. So I kind of thought that maybe I'll kind of try and protect my body a bit more.
Yeah.
So I kind of stopped at 18, but but definitely a big love of rugby.
Yeah, that's awesome. Like, yeah, to get back to the main conversation about the about the work. So this was like a great, let's say, break for the conversation. So for your work, when you like work with people and you give them like ownership and at the product or the work you are doing, what kind of indicators that you look for them to trust them, or like
Sure.
how you know that they are the right one?
We actually have some. I mean, I could find them. I don't remember them off the top of my head, which I probably should. But we actually have some like core principles for people working at Ivy to kind of to focus on and to go for. I can just do my best off the top of my head.
Yeah, it's fine. Just like to talk about it, and we can like have a link in the comments later.
Sure. One of the main ones is proactivity, basically. So I'm always particularly impressed when somebody does a task that they weren't explicitly asked to do, and it's a really fundamental important part of the code base, and and it's also not kind of, I mean, all of the tasks need doing. So I also don't want to undermine kind of other members that add a ton of functions that are also really important, to be honest. But one good indicator, obviously, is kind of sometimes like the really hard things to fix are deeply fundamental. It's kind of really hard to wrap your head around, and it's kind of a fundamental design problem. And if they are kind of identified proactively, that demonstrates a very good understanding of the code, a good understanding of what should be prioritized, because obviously those fixes are minor changes in lines of code that have a big impact, obviously. So
Yeah.
if people can identify those problems and proactively fix them, that's really good. And also kind of diving deep, very related to that. So a tendency to just really get into the meat of what's going on, the fundamental design that underpins Ivy, and kind of understanding that, and kind of not only staying at the auxiliary kind of side. So that is something good as well. And yeah, I guess these, and also just kind of self-determination, I guess. Like, I think it's good if people, obviously, I also want to get the balance right, because we very much encourage people to ask questions at the beginning completely. And no question is a silly question at all.
Yeah.
Everyone's learning on the role, including me. There's many things, many things that people on the team are better skilled at than I'm, and have a better understanding of, and I'm trying to learn, from them as well. Of course, everybody learns from each other all the time, and I think you can't learn unless everybody's totally comfortable with admitting
Yeah.
when they don't know something. Because otherwise, if everyone's being proud and pretending to know everything, no one's learning. Everyone's just pretending to be experts, and no one is.
Yeah.
So everybody asks questions if you don't know. No shame in that at all. But of course, then long term, I guess the people that don't need to be kind of, I don't know, kind of, if you don't need to be constantly told exactly what to work on next, you don't need to be micromanaged.
Yeah.
People tend to kind of, I don't know how to say it, but maybe end up in kind of naturally more leading positions when they kind of proactively identify the problems rather than waiting to be told
Yeah.
what they are, kind of thing. These are just some points. There's other things I could say, but and also another one is explain. Sorry, another
Yeah.
really good quality is when people proactively disseminate their knowledge. So they answer people's questions. We want to encourage, when someone new joins the team and they ask a question, the person that responds to that question is, that's a good sign to me, because they're fostering teamwork. They're not trying to be the best at the expense of everybody else doing a great job. It's kind of, you got to help the team first and foremost as well. So, proactively helping your colleagues as much as you can is also something that we really encourage. And yeah, it's great. So these are just some of them.
That's pretty awesome. Like, I feel some kind of, let's say, some connection of the academic area and your academic background here and the management as well, because like in research, no one is expert at the research at the end, so you have
Yeah,
like the
yeah.
same mindset somehow moved from research to company, and that's giving some kind of better management style.
Maybe. I don't know. That's certainly one way you could frame it. Yeah, I'm not sure. I'm not sure if that's what it is, or what it is exactly. But I think just in general, I don't know. I mean, so I've done lots of. I mean, not that many, but I've done plenty of management roles or kind of leadership roles throughout my degree, where I typically would lead projects and things like this. It's just kind of a role that I gravitated towards for one reason or another, and definitely it's improved. I think, I think it just kind of occurred to me that, I don't know, kind of, how do I say this? That kind of nobody knows everything, and anybody who
Yeah.
pretends they do is pretending. And therefore, if you're truly confident in your own ability and your own competencies and your lack of them in some areas, you should be quite comfortable with that, and secure with that. And therefore, asking questions is not a problem. And I guess if you're in a leadership role and you might be in a position where your kind of way of behaving is then something that might disseminate down a little bit, then I think it's even more important, because a team that are to look stupid, or a team that are not gonna, be as productive or as friendly or as cohesive as they could be. So I don't know where it came from exactly, but this is kind of something I've learned along the way somewhere.
Yeah, that's good. Like, you have it based on your experience. So, and for the question, when you said like no one asked, like there is no silly question. I just remember, I think, I once was in Berlin factory, in it was like a startup thing in Berlin. So
Yep.
I had this like guy, I don't remember his name, but he was like asking a really awesome question during the like a conference I was attending, and I got curious about his question, like how he got like this kind of all awesome question and asking them to the speaker. When I went to ask him and I told him like that, he just said like, "There is no silly question." And it's
Yeah,
just like be bold and ask the question that you want, and you will find a
yeah,
good one. Eh, Most of the people like think that they have silly question and they are kind of afraid to ask,
yeah,
which is like kind of a blocker for them on the long term to
yeah.
show
And
themselves.
I can't say definitively that there might not be environments where they are penalised, and if that's the case, then that's very bad, I think.
Yeah,
But there might be some rationality to having that fear. But I think if you ever are creating an environment where you kind of use silly questions against somebody, then that's a really bad environment that you've created, in my opinion. I mean, obviously,
yeah.
I just have one set of experiences, but at least this is how I see things, and I think everybody, just learns much more quickly when it's not like that, pretty much. Yeah,
And that environment would be like more of toxic one if you just
I,
like use the question against people.
I would think so. I mean, I guess with everything there's a balance. You could obviously, if you wanted to, you could make a counter argument, which is if everybody relies on just asking questions when they don't know, then nobody's going to proactively look things up. And I guess
Yeah,
you could argue that people might get lazy if you allow them to ask silly questions, and they could have just looked it up. But at least in my experience, it doesn't tend to lead that way. If the people you've hired are hardworking people and are diligent and everything, then they're not going to ask questions just to be kind of time inefficient or annoy people or something. And
yeah,
it's anyway. I think that's important. And another thing, it's not entirely related to this, but I think one thing that I've increasingly thought is that, particularly in computer science, you can really do merit-based hiring, whereby you kind of disregard, to quite a large extent, the CV. And there's a bit of a there's maybe a bit of a I'm just guessing, but there might be a bit of a tendency for people to feel certainly superior, because I've seen it,
yeah,
superior or inferior because of the university you go to or something. And I don't think that's correct at all, because I mean, I don't want to go too political or anything, but like going to a good university is an indicator of intelligence, but it's also an indicator of, like, wealth to some extent. And there's a lot
yeah,
of intelligence and capability is uniformly distributed across the world, in my mind. And the people that get to go to kind of worldly universities are a small selection of those very capable people,
yeah,
for reasons that aren't only about capability, of course. And therefore, particularly in something like software engineering, where there thankfully are the means for self-education, which might not be true for law, or it might not be true for certain areas where there's bigger kind of proliferation of insider knowledge, that means you do need to be in the in crowd in order to perform, which is not a good setup. Thankfully, software engineering is less like that because there's great online resources. And that
yeah,
means that I would encourage anybody to really focus on merit-based hiring and not overfit on the CV. We've had some weeks where we have rejected applicants from Stanford, MIT, and Harvard all in 1 week, and we've hired somebody that doesn't have a degree. They've just
yeah,
educated themselves on YouTube because they did much better. And I think that's something that you should trust and back, because amazing software engineers are all over the place, and you should kind of
yeah,
be willing to, trust your own assessments to give them the benefit of the doubt, is another thing I would say. But the reason I was saying that, it's a bit of a tangent. The reason I was saying that is because I would say you should never feel superior or inferior because of your CV. Personally,
yeah,
I think that's something even if you're, hot. Well, I was going to swear then, but even if you're like, top dog and you've been at all these companies, you shouldn't feel better than anybody because of that. And you're at an unheard of, place, or your CV isn't anything to kind of, be really impressed with or something. Like, you shouldn't feel like you can't just voice your questions at all. And I think, I don't know. Yeah. Anyway, I'm going off a bit of
yeah.
a tangent there,
That's
but
like
that's another point.
that's an important thing that you mentioned. You just like reminded me like in the one of the latest conversation I had with Brian Douglas, which is the founder of open source. He talked about like open source contribution will like show off or the trust that you need to have in the people who will you work with,
Yeah.
and you can like hire people from all around the world, and you can see their work in the open source, which is like
Yeah.
way better than like indicator than the university.
I think so too, for sure. Totally agree. Just for clarification as well, I mean, to be honest, even with us, it's not necessarily the case that people have a stellar open source profile either necessarily. In a way, like I can shine a bit of a light if it's interesting on kind of the application process as well. Like basic. So I mean, as anyone that's applied will know, so first of all, you need to get a pull request accepted into the repository, which basically this isn't an assessed thing. It's kind of it's like an entry barrier. It's not like we compare PRs and see, you know, who did better, because actually they're all different. Like every task is an actual task that is contributing to the repository. Everyone's paid for doing this, and that kind of just, I guess, assesses the willingness to learn Ivy and to actually put the work into, you know, understand how to make a PR, read the docs, and so on. And then kind of these 10 video questions, and then a technical interview is specifically about what it's about, but kind of, because we vary it a bit, but basically kind of some context on it being on a certain part of IV, and need to do a bit of background homework to understand this, and then we'll kind of dive deep into technical areas around it. And mostly the hiring decisions are made almost entirely based on the performance of the video answers and the interview itself, and the open source prior work and the CV are both pretty much, I mean, not to like, but pretty much not taken that much consideration of. Because what we want to see is people that have kind of bothered to take the time to learn about Ivy are actually genuinely excited and interested about it, have put the work in for the interview, and not kind of assume they'll get through it just because of you know, something else. And I would kind of rather have somebody that doesn't have an amazing CV, but is really passionate about what we're doing and is excited about the role, than somebody that has the best CV you've ever seen, but doesn't really want to put the work in. And I think, you know, every day I'd take the person that maybe doesn't have the same experience, but is really shown the intelligence and the keenness to learn about what we're doing and everything. So yeah, anyway, sorry.
That's really awesome.
Answering questions you're not asking.
Yeah, you answered
so
questions
like
you. No, it's fine. Like for me, I just like I remember that one of the people audience asked the same question about like how you get like the machine learning interns, and you just like answered the question before asking it. So
okay,
it was like, thank you, Gwendian. Yeah, you are mind reader, a good mind reader for that.
There we go. One of my many skills.
That's awesome. And for me, I just remember that even like when you mentioned that you are having people that you pay them to contribute to AV, you even like giving them opportunity for like doing the pull request for 3 months, which is like which is something like unexpected.
Wait, sorry, I didn't fully follow that. I'm giving the opportunity to do what for 3 months, sorry?
Yeah, when someone applied to the AV, so like you give them the homework through Upwork, and you tell them like, even if you didn't do it right now and you are busy right now, you can still have it later in the future.
No, of course, no. We keep it fully asynchronous. So yeah, exactly. So when someone applies and they have a coding challenge task, it's not time based at all. It's kind of whenever you get the time, do it. And some people will do it 4 months later when they've finished exams or something, and that's totally fine. We continue to hire on a rolling basis. We will continue to hire. It's not like we say we need to hire 10 interns at summer and that's it. Like, and also we take an approach whereby it's more within reason, obviously, but it's more that we bring somebody on if they're good enough than us having a quota of how many people we need. Like some weeks, there might be 2 weeks that go past where nobody quite met the bar, and then 1 week we have 3 exceptional people, and then we kind of, I mean, the internships typically start at least 2 or 3 months after the interview date, just to kind of keep things uniform. But it's kind of more like, if you're good, if you hit the bar, we'll bring you on. It's not like we have a quota and therefore you're going to lose out because you applied on a more competitive week or something like this as well, just to paint a bit of a picture, if that's helpful.
That's really awesome. That's great. And for that, like here we can like move forward in the conversation and ask like, how did you monetize Eevee? Since it's like an open source framework.
Sorry, how many times? Sorry, again.
How did you monetize it? Like, how would you earn money from it?
Oh, we
like how you turned it into a company from open source framework to a company.
yet to be seen is the short answer. To be honest, at the moment, it's not top of our minds. We're basically trying to provide value first and foremost. We're still pre-release, basically, on the actual compiler and transpiler. We first of all, before we start getting ahead of ourselves and running before we can walk and trying to work any of that out. We first and foremost want to just make sure we're building something of meaningful, genuine value. And I think we will be, and we are, but we will only know that definitively when it's out there and people can use it and try it. And we can learn a lot from that. And then we can start to think about kind of these kind of questions. But it's not to say we have not thought about it, but it's kind of not top of our mind. First of all, we need to build something that's useful. And that's kind of very much the center of our thinking at the moment.
So it's like more your customer centric right now to have something for the people.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we're really fortunate to have an amazing community, kind of stargazers and Discord and everything. And yeah, as you may know from looking on the README at the time of recording, we've still not yet released the public access to the compiler and the transpiler yet. That's coming imminently, and we kind of first of all want to make sure that this user experience is a good one, and that this is helping people solve problems, and it's actually really resonating. Not only the story, it seems has resonated, but actually the software and the product is not a word, the framework basically. And then we can think about other things later on, basically.
Yeah, that's awesome. Like it's good. Like you see that this kind of question is like, or this kind of answer is like something that I try to get in this kind of conversation, because like I want the people to see that, like when the people see like you are going to YC, they might think like you're already making a revenue, or you're already having like customers, you are already having everything done, but like it's not like that.
No, and actually, what I think is maybe even going to start happening with YC, I don't know exactly, but to be honest, with something like YC, it's a lot less about a concrete business model as it is about a group of founders or founder that they think will be able to find a way. Like certainly there's no expectation at all that you have a full business model and revenue projections when you do YC. It's obviously really for kind of idea phase companies. So that's certainly kind of what we are a bit right now. So
that's awesome. That's really good. And here, since we talked about that, the revenue, how you see the future of like open source machine learning frameworks?
Yeah, good question. Anyone's guess. I mean, the obvious trend that we're seeing is, there's a trend and a counter trend. We're seeing some trend away from open source with OpenAI, ChatGPT, and etc. All of this kind of not only being closed source, but also not even a mathematical explanation of the model. It's kind of completely proprietary. I mean, they released this paper, but obviously, they didn't say anything. So that's one trend. Like as AI becomes a more serious kind of money-making thing, it kind of moves away from the research departments into the like heavy revenue-creating businesses. We're going to naturally see a move away from open source in some areas, like OpenAI. There's obviously a counter movement where it seems like every other company in the world is trying to kind of gain the moral high ground over OpenAI by open sourcing versions of it. I feel as though that might be a reactive thing, whether they actually have the kind of altruism there. I don't know. Anyway, but like, so this is one kind of angle that a lot of companies are taking in open sourcing. I hope that personally, I hope that most of the fundamental technology of AI remains open source as much as possible, because I think it's a good thing for everybody. Kind of in terms of particularly with like model architectures and kind of the fundamental science of what's making intelligence work. If that's all controlled black box in a small number of companies, it might be bad. But anyway, I know the question isn't about AGI, it's about open source in general.
Yeah, you can start, like you can talk about that. It's fine for me, like because it's both of them are connected somehow during this conversation.
Yeah, it's anyone's guess. Obviously, we're in such a kind of, with the release of large language models, not the release, we've known for many years that they can do what ChatGPT can do, but obviously kind of properly productizing it for the first time such that anybody can use it. Like my brother works in ed tech startup, and none of them had heard of GPT-2, GPT-3, completely not there. And now suddenly ChatGPT and kind of, all his colleagues and everybody's like, oh, wow, you can log on and suddenly try this. It was kind of just this like paradigm shift where non-technical people can suddenly experience this thing that kind of, ML people knew for quite a while. And that's obviously creating a turbulent environment right now, which is incredibly hard to predict. It's anyone's guess what's going to happen. But in terms of open source, I think there's going to remain, I think a lot of the cutting edge thought leading stuff is going to continue to happen in universities. I think things like NeurIPS and ICML and ICLR and CVR and top AI conferences are going to still be pushing the limits of the cutting edge stuff a lot, and therefore open source will be a really important thing. And a lot of people like philosophically believe in open source, and therefore great thinkers are still kind of going to stay in that area. The only point I would say, again, I'm saying things that aren't super introspective, really. I mean, obviously, like a lot of people would say the same thing. But another point I would say is that, of course, as compute requirements increase, it will be harder for universities on government grants to really meaningfully compete and understand and kind of do the research about how these models behave under massive compute resources, which it's not, it seems has been the biggest driver of AI technology. It's been the fact that all these algorithms that were pretty much defined decades ago, backpropagation and stuff, CNNs suddenly work really well with huge data and huge compute. Now transformers that have even less inductive bias than other networks, that they're this super general kind of learning architecture with a huge amount of data and resources. They do really, really well, and that's an area of research that unfortunately requires a ton of money today. If compute power becomes more affordable, then hopefully, sorry, I'm going on a monologue here. I'll stop in a second.
Yeah,
But if compute power becomes more affordable, then obviously universities can engage again. But I guess there's always going to be this tail where probably the exponentially 10 times faster stuff is going to be super expensive, and probably then it might mean that the research power falls into the hands of the rich and the big enterprises. Yeah, and that might not be a good thing for open source leading the way in AI research. But it's anyone's guess. I mean, obviously now Sam Altman has said that model size is no longer going to be that important anymore. And if that's the case, then maybe research can catch up when the hardware gets affordable enough in a few years. Who knows? Who knows?
So it's like, I get like that. It's like a hard question. Like even like when you think about that, when things are being open sourced, you might like enable people from different area or less privileged people to join or like to contribute as well. And do like maybe have like smaller models, or let's say think more about the thing in mathematical way rather than just like saying like we have the hardware and we just do whatever we want. But like when you have constraints, you might like challenge yourself to do something better in terms of like mathematical equation or mathematical model.
It's true. The only downside is if that's really not relevant. Like in a way, like if you can train a huge foundation model and then you can do like distillation, which you can do like to run it on a edge device or a mobile phone, or you can find clever ways to quantize it, prune it, sparsify it, kind of being able to train a model in like really resource constrained environments, just in terms of like world AI access, might not be that relevant, because you can just train it once on a huge thing that enterprises can do, and then mass provide it, because inference is then affordable for everybody. And if that's the paradigm we see, then it might just be, I mean, I'm not saying that no one's going to do research in that world, but the really kind of the fundamental stuff that's driving, us closer to AGI, whatever that is, might then not be really doable in research lab, because it might not scale. It might be like you can do things on a toy model that's 100 times smaller, but the findings in that model are just not relevant when you scale up. And if they're not, then you just can't do that research. I hope that's not the case. I hope that it's not. But so far, at least up to this point in time, the trend has been that data and model size scales pretty crazily with capability. But that's not to say there's not a lot of tips and tricks. I mean, in a way, like the transformer was identified as a good architecture in a relatively small data, small compute paradigm, obviously, in like 2017. So obviously I think the algorithmic innovations that I guess some of those that work well in the smaller realm will still be on the right path to scale really well to the larger realm. So that kind of research remains open. Anyway, this is getting a bit abstract, but rather than making a prediction, what I can say is that I hope meaningful AI models and research remains open source, and that would be better for the world, I think. But even that's like debatable in both directions, of course. But
for me, I came from the same background. Like I'm like doing this kind of, let's say, talks or were supported by GitHub at the beginning, and I
Yeah,
was in the GitHub community and the whole open source community
yeah,
there, and you see like how it will impact empower people in the whole world. Like even like enabling something like this. So I'm in Turkey right now, and you are in Berlin, and I came from different background, and you are from different background, and you can like we connected because of open source. Like
yeah,
if it wasn't open source, I might think twice before inviting you.
yeah. Makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah,
Open sources are definitely a powerful thing. And I also, I mean, these are obviously cliche things as well, but something like Ivy wouldn't be possible without open source
yeah,
because um, it's kind of aside from there being difficult design decisions to make, there is a monumental engineering effort that's needed for that to work. And we now have, I think, 900 contributors all over the world. In fact, it'd be interesting to see a map of where people are from. But obviously, every continent all over the world. It's a full global, massive engineering effort to
yeah.
unify all of these fields. And those 900 contributors that have made pull requests on all these different functions, that's not a gimmick. That's like the necessary work to get all of this working. And we wouldn't have been able to do it without those people. And that's the beauty of open source is that you can have your vision say this is kind of what the work that needs to be done, and you can have a whole global community instantly take it up and contribute towards this thing to make AI more flexible for everybody. That's what we're hoping the end user experience is anyway. I guess we'll see when the first release comes out, but I'm quietly confident that it'll be a useful tool.
That sounds really related for to use that. And
Yeah.
from here, like how you see that the Ivy will contribute to the whole ecosystem, in the AI, and let's say the large language model and the stuff like that.
Yeah. So I think specifically to large language models. So certainly, I mean, there's these two use cases. One of them is being able to quickly try research, and if you want to leverage some of the awesome stuff that DeepMind do, which is in JAX, and you want to be able to quickly take that and try out in your PyTorch model, you can kind of research LLMs better. One thing I would say is that I think actually, so PyTorch is obviously the main framework. It's the framework that OpenAI use. It's the framework that most research labs use, particularly kind of in Western universities, and that's good. But what it doesn't have is like really good deployment capabilities. I mean, that you could argue. And of course, they're working on this. There's now torch.compile in Torch 2. They've got bindings with NVIDIA TensorRT and things. But still, kind of if you implement architectures directly in JAX and run it on a TPU, for example, quite often it's quite a lot faster. In fact, I think Hugging Face have been doing this on a few pretty popular models and showing kind of 70 times speed ups and things like this, which is what we observe as well. And XLA and TPUs are really, really good when you can. So I'm going on a long answer here again, but
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine. You can go. You can go with that.
yeah. All I was going to say is I think there's a lot of things, but like let's assume that foundation models and LLMs continue to become really widely used. It might mean that some companies do a little bit less internal training and they do a bit more outsourcing to an API where some foundation model is doing it for them and they don't need to train their own models at all. If that happens, kind of deployment becomes even more important than it is now, and more kind of money is spent by companies doing deployment and things like this, and that becomes a bottleneck. Kind of deploying these models really efficiently to scale to millions of people. I think there's a statistic that OpenAI are spending about $700,000 every day just to serve GPT or ChatGPT. So I think kind of streamlining the research code to deployment is something we're really interested in. And specifically, it's quite often going to be taking PyTorch code that is flexible, extensible, easy to quickly try new ideas out, which is exactly what you want when you're researching things. But then when you go to deploy it, you want a super efficient, fully static graph with no dynamic Python elements that can just really, really efficiently go. So I think trying to go from fully dynamic PyTorch to a super efficient, fully directed acyclic mathematical graph, which can be run on TPU or any hardware vendor, is going to be a really big thing for the field on LLMs as well, where deployment is everything. And that's something that we are hoping to help out with and be a part of that story. That's not to say that other companies and initiatives aren't already kind of working on this. I think the work that other companies in this direction are doing a great kind of Apache TVM, and obviously there's OctoML, there's Modular by the creators of MLIR, all playing important roles in this, and we certainly want to kind of join in with the efforts, basically. Yeah.
That's awesome. I hope that to see it in the future and be able to use that as well. And I think this is like we have filled 1 hour. I really enjoyed the
Sounds good.
talk. I really
Likewise,
enjoyed the talk,
likewise.
and I feel like I can still continue with the talk, but like we are
Yeah, yeah.
constrained in the
We
time.
should probably have some end, I guess.
Yeah,
Also, sorry if I monologued a little bit too much. I have a big tendency to kind of just keep going. I hope that
yeah,
worked
it's
okay.
fine for me. Like even when you go, like you open like doors for a different kind of conversation, or
Yeah,
let's say different kind of
yeah,
talk
yeah.
that we can have there. And before the ending, like we have some comment from Dennis. He said like he recommend a Korean poem by Do Jongwan, which is
Mhm.
like it's the meaning of the poem is coincide with the Ivy project
Thank you
and
very
the
much.
whole
Did you ever
ecosystem.
I'll have a look. It's
Oh,
awesome.
that's
Yeah, poem
interesting.
is
Like
coincidence with Ivy Projective. There we go. I'm gonna read that poem, and maybe it'll be on our landing page.
yeah, that would be awesome. Thank you, Dennis, for sharing that.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Dennis.
And
I'll take a look.
before the ending, do you have like just one short sentence that you would like to share with the audience?
Oh, I don't know. I would say if it was in 3 weeks' time, I would say pip install Ivy and give it a try. But if you do that now, it won't work because we don't have it. It's not set up. So I would say check out our website, and I can give our cliched slogan of "Let's unify AI." There we
Let's
go.
unify. Okay, that's great. Cliche. Thank you for joining today.
Awesome. Likewise.
I really enjoyed that conversation. It was great to see the question from the people as well and
Definitely.
talk with you.
Definitely. And also the final one again, I might butcher the pronunciation, but Eid Mubarak. Again, have a great end of Ramadan festivities.
Thank you for that. Eid Mubarak to everyone. Inshallah.
Yeah.
And we are going to end that right now. Thank you everyone for joining and see you in the future episode.
Yeah. Bye bye.
Bye.